it's your last day in this place. It's your last day with your class before you go your separate college ways. And you're all polished up and you have your family with you somewhere, and you have the faculty right across from you. And you have the sun coming through that window behind you. And you have William Blake's words in Jerusalem. And you simply don't forget that.
John Nicholas Brown had a dream. It was nurtured during his school days and emerged fully formed by his sophomore year in college. It sprang from the two great passions of his life, the ornate ceremonies of the Episcopal Church and the soaring beauty of medieval architecture. Enlisting the artistry of family friend and architect Ralph Adams Cram, he set out to build a Gothic chapel for St. George's School. He was 20 years old.
I came here as a faculty brat when Dad began teaching here, and I've known the building literally all my life. It's in many ways has informed my life. It's a place that has stayed with me.
Our school was founded in 1896 by John Diamond. The school thrived and in the early 1900s moved to the hilltop here. The school evolved over the years, a boys' school up into the 70s when it became coeducational. We strive to be very diverse. We have students from at least 30 states and 20 countries, about 335 students. I would like to see us just to continue on the path that we are following. We have these aspirations for our students, and we have clearly defined our guiding principles, and we're following them very, very closely.
In 1907, St. George's was designated an official Episcopal Church school, though the nearest church on Aquidneck Island was a 5-mile round trip. One of the boys who dutifully made that trek in the early years was John Nicholas Brown, scion of a wealthy Rhode Island family, deeply religious, and gifted with the mind of a scholar.
My father got the most amazing education at St. George's School. He had a wonderful time, except for Sundays when they had to walk through the snow over to St. Columbus. And he vowed that really has to be remedied.
In the spring of 1922, a stunned audience gathered for Prize Day were greeted with the news that an anonymous donor planned to build a chapel, more than a chapel, a superb Gothic structure which would soar from the hilltop to the heavens like a medieval cathedral. 2 years later, on St. George's Day, April 23rd, the boys of the school formed a human chain in the shape of the foundation, and ground was broken for the St. George's Chapel.
The fact that John Nicholas Brown, when he was designing and locating the chapel, decided to place it directly onto the academic building, I think represents the fundamental interaction between the life of the spirit and the life of the mind.
So many schools have lovely chapels, but they're always off somewhere in a different part. They're not physically attached to the school.
God has left us to ourselves.
This is the only school that I know of, anywhere, where the mission of the school is written in stone and not just in words.
I see this union of the chapel and of the academic building. It's symbolically representing this notion of the goodness and the knowledge that we're trying to teach our youngsters.
We preach and we strongly believe in students being very proficient in 3 areas, and it's mind, body, and spirit. Mind, academically, in the schoolhouse, in the classrooms. Body, athletically, on the athletic fields. And then spirit, and that's where the chapel ties in.
Here in the chapel, there are very many beautiful things to look at. Above my head is the central boss, some 55 feet from the floor, carved by Joseph Coletti. It shows St. George killing the dragon. He's surrounded by 8 wingless angels, all ready to help if he needs it. On the west wall, we have the Welch window, in memory of John Welch of the class of 1942. On the floor at my feet, you see this magnificent maze designed for the chapel by its donor, John Nicholas Brown. It can be entered from any doorway, and the whole idea is to find your way through these complicated paths to the phoenix in the center, the ancient symbol of the resurrection. In early days, pilgrims would crawl through this on their knees in lieu of making a trip to the Holy Land.
I love the maze. I think it's playful, and it talks to teenagers, but I think it also speaks to the message of the chapel and the altar and the significance of it. I often take students upstairs to look down and make sure that they can find their path.
Once you return to the center, to the phoenix, you now have a direct path to eternal salvation in the form of the altar.
The chapel is the place where we put front and center life's big questions. Is life chance, or is there some purpose behind life? The chapel holds up a tradition of prayer and praise and invites the students to participate in that as a tradition that might have an answer to that question.
At the east end of our chapel is the main altar, a truly beautiful addition to the entire structure. Unfortunately, it's rarely ever seen until Good Friday when it's uncovered, but look at the beautiful marble that this is made of. To this side of the altar, you can see the school's organ surrounded by a hand-carved wooden organ screen, a magnificent piece of work. The organ screen is covered with detailed iconography, all of which was designed specifically for the structure by John Nicholas Brown himself. Surrounding the altar are 18 separate little angels, each one of which is carrying a banner. If you look very closely, you'll see that very carefully the Lord's Prayer has been divided into 18 verses, and each banner carries one of those 18 verses. If you look at the 2 beautiful angels on either side of the east window, you'll see one is holding a crown of thorns, another one is holding a beautiful chalice. Even though people sit in this chapel constantly for services, I'll bet half of them never ever see those angels. This chapel was built of limestone, all of which came from Bedford, Indiana. Every piece of this stone was quarried from the quarries located in that area, cut to specific size by the stonemasons in Bedford, numbered, and then shipped to Newport for construction like a giant jigsaw puzzle. And here we are behind the altar, the one spot left where you can actually see the construction numbers. In this area, the altar has some very unique architectural features. This, for instance, is called the sedalia, or seats for the clergy, and here in the corner we have the credence table, complete with a waste basin. Now let's have a look at the cloister. We're now in the cloisters of the chapel, which is on the south side, actually part of the flying buttresses that support this building. You'll notice in the vaulting we have a series of shields. Actually, there's 15 different saints. Each one of them was either a teacher or a builder. At the end of the cloister, we have the outside of the donor's door. Now, the donor always felt that this chapel was truly a work of art. And since he was the donor of the chapel, he felt that he was the artist that had actually created it. And this is where he signed his work of art. Here on this side of the door, we have a statue of St. John writing his epistle, with the eagle, always the symbol of St. John. On the other side of the door, we have St. Nicholas as a bishop. Notice how he's carefully hiding the bag of money so you don't recognize how rich he is. And above the door, we have the family coat of arms of the Brown family, hence John Nicholas Brown. The door itself is very unique. This is a 14th century Spanish door knocker. And look at these beautiful wrought iron hinge straps, all done by Samuel Yellen of Philadelphia. But the inside of this door is even more unique than the outside. Here on the inside of the donor's door, we have some of the finest work Coletti has done on this chapel. Here he carved in teak rather than stone. On the right panel, we have St. John writing his epistle. Here again is the eagle, the symbol of St. John. being watched over by his guardian angel. Not St. George, but his guardian angel. Notice he has his foot firmly planted on the neck of the dragon, the symbol of evil. In the left panel of the door, we have again St. Nicholas as a bishop, bringing to life the 3 children who had been murdered by the evil innkeeper, chopped up and thrown into the stew pot. Now let's have a look at Coletti in stone. Here we have the statue of St. Christopher, also carved by Joseph Coletti. Christopher was always known as the patron saint of travelers, hence this door at the bottom of the tower is known as the Traveler's Door. On the north wall of the antechapel, we have the memorial to the donor of this building, John Nicholas Brown, a member of the class of 1918. And above his memorial stone is the very first stained glass window put in the chapel, the chivalry window installed in 1938 and a gift of the old boys. Now let's take a look at what's up in the tower. During World War II, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there was a lookout tower on the top of it, manned constantly by the students, by the faculty, by neighbors and friends.
We had a little booth, which had a telephone in it, which was connected directly to headquarters in Boston.
I think most of the students were involved in watching from the tower. I think I had the distinction of scoring the second lowest grade in the school on the airplane spotting test. I was fortunate that nothing depended on my identification skills.
It's very cold, and if you went way up there, they would only work in half-hour shifts, as I recall it. So I was impressed with that, and I spent a lot of time as a 7-year-old looking out off Second Beach to see if I could find any subs, but that did not happen.
We're now on the top of the chapel tower, the highest point on Aquidneck Island. We're actually higher than the top of the Newport Bridge to the west. This point is 147 feet above the floor of the chapel, plus the height of the hilltop gives us 231 feet above sea level. On a good clear day like today, you can see Martha's Vineyard over my shoulder, and to the southwest you can actually see Block Island. Here on the northeast side of the chapel, you can finally see the entire building in one glance. Up until now, we've only been looking at small segments of the chapel. Here you see the entire building. The north side has many beautiful things, starting with a statue of St. George done by Joseph Coletti. On the edge of the chivalry window, you can see the dolphin water spout. Above the chivalry window is the statue of the Madonna. And look at some of the beautiful bosses on this building. All of these very unique to the time. On the east end of the building, you can see high above the east window the statue of Christ. To his right is the statue of St. Stephen, representing the New Testament, and to his left is John the Baptist, representing the Old Testament. Since the day of the chapel's consecration on St. George's Day, the 23rd of April, 1928, this building has been used for very many things.
It's the heartbeat of the community. We need that restoration. We need that connection to spiritual things, whether we're religious or not. We need that central place to come together and think about questions that are not addressed necessarily in the classroom or the playing fields.
For me, the really special moments are those Tuesday speeches, because I get a chance to really know the inner life of a student. And to me, that's what the chapel represents, the inner life of the school.
For me, the chapel's just a nice place to go and think about the week. It's just a nice place for me to think about what's happened to me, about the stress that I've had to deal with a little bit, and it's just a place to relax and reflect.
I think the kids do realize that it's an available space for them to have some individual and sort of cognitive time, some emotional time that our schedule frankly doesn't really allow for them.
If I miss chapel, I really feel like I've missed out on something. You never know what's going to happen in chapel, whether it's going to be an irreverent student speech or a profound meditation on some fundamental value of life.
The chapel is completely dark, and the first people to walk in are torchbearers. And these torchbearers have on dark brown suits with hoods on them, and you cannot see their faces. And after the torchbearers walk in, the choir walks in.
There is no school that celebrates the holiday season and the Christmas season like St. George's does. It's very special to the school.
It's a really amazing experience. The acoustics in that building alone are unlike anything else that I've ever sung in before. It promotes good performing, and it makes you want to do your best, live up to the standards of the space you're in, really.
Musicians dream about the acoustics that exist here. All the cathedrals and the churches in Europe that are so famous for their music and the instruments all have reverberation and a presence to the sound that you hear in this building.
Oh, it's great when we get the harmony together and it rings throughout the chapel and we fill up the entire chapel. It's the best feeling ever.
It's where they start, it's where they finish, and so many important things happen that they may take for granted while they're here. And then they think back and say, wow, we had some very, very poignant things happen in that chapel.
When I first came to the school, I thought that the chapel maybe complemented the academic program, but now I've come to realize that actually it's the other way around, that the academic program complements the chapel program.
The chapel's a place where I think we feed people spiritually. They might not skip out of here on any given evening and say, my life has changed completely. But 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, they come back.
There's a great sense of comfort. This is grounded and visible, and as close as we can get to God on Aquidneck Island anyway.
My father went to St. George's. My brother went to St. George's. My son went to St. George's. I really love the school. I've always just had a great affection for it.
I can still remember the way it was then, and it has not changed very much. There are traditions formed by this chapel which are very important to the life of the school. It's St. George's Center, and I hope it always stays that way.
To have things last and reach out into the future is one of the most satisfying things that we have around us. As Winston Churchill famously said, first we shape our buildings, and then they shape us. And to be shaped by that site and that architecture must help young people find their inner being.